What does God see when we're going through grief and suffering? Why does it sometimes feel like when we're hurting the most, He doesn't care or that He abandons us? Does it even matter if we have the right perspective on our grief or not? It's actually extremely important and to our benefit to have a realistic and godly outlook on our pain and suffering in this life so that we can fully process it and heal from it. And today we're actually going to look at our pain through God's eyes, from His perspective, and what that really does for us when we're in the middle of our grief. Welcome back, everyone. Today is part 2 of a 4-part series that we are doing called Growing Through Grief. We are covering a whole bunch of things, talking about processing and healing and seeing our pain in the right perspective, the godly perspective. In part 1, we looked at healthy ways to acknowledge and process the pain that we're going through. And if you missed that, the clip for the video should be somewhere around here. This week, we're going to do a perspective shift on our suffering. We're going to zoom out and get a God's eye view of everything and break down why it's so important to have clarity on our pain, even if it's in hindsight. First, we're going to look at the truth behind God's perspective on our suffering. Second, we'll talk about where He really is in our pain, especially when we feel like He's abandoned us to just suffer alone. And third, we're going to start to shift how we look at pain and find the growth pattern in it, so that it's not just an emotion or a season, but a tool that we can actually use moving forward. Whether you're watching this on YouTube or you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcast, I am glad you're here. And if you are, you probably have gone through or are going through some pretty tough things, some pain that you're dealing with, some healing that you're having to do. Please know you're not alone. You are being prayed for. I pray for every one of you guys. Now, I am not an expert on how to get through grief, since everyone's pain is different, everyone's situation is different. There's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I do not claim to be a grief guru over here. But I have gone through some very deep seasons of pain in my life several times, and I'm sure there will be more. The things I share with you are simply things that I have learned that have gotten me through those seasons and what God's taught me in the process. One of the heaviest seasons of pain that I went through was actually about 20 years ago, give or take. And I went through a period of really deep depression that lasted a long time, not just a few months, we're talking years. And it started not long after I got married the first time around. And in hindsight, I think it was just a perfect storm, honestly. There wasn't one specific thing that triggered it. I think it was a storm of realizing my marriage was not what I believed it to be, mixed with extreme loneliness. Eventually, I got pregnant and had my first child in the middle of it. And where we were living at the time, I had no family around, no friends. I didn't know my neighbors. We didn't have a church home. And I think all of that got stirred in with some postpartum depression that I didn't know I had. There was no one to diagnose. And I do think there were several other things contributing, including pretending to everyone else that I was fine and keeping it to myself. But those were the main things. And it just ended up sending me into a spiral that kind of slowly but steadily went deeper as the years, months and years went on. And I was super close to God prior to all that. Like I said, nothing happened. I was close to Him. I had a good relationship with God. So don't believe anybody who tells you that you're depressed or anxious or whatever because you need to get closer to God. That is not always the case. I felt like for some reason that God had chosen to just wall me in without His presence, and that absolutely broke my heart. I kept doing all the things that I was supposed to do, the things that they say really help to bring you back to God or to be able to hear from God, reading your Bible, praying, all those things. And even though I couldn't feel them, I was like, okay, well, I know this works, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And I did, but it didn't fix anything. I figured if I did all those things, then the feelings would eventually straighten themselves out, and God would realize how hard I was trying and show up again. So I kept reading my Bible, and I kept praying, and I kept trying to storm the gates of heaven and try to get someone to answer. Nothing. And I couldn't talk to anyone about it because I felt like I wasn't supposed to feel that way. And the little bit of advice that I did get from a couple of people who were close enough to at least know something was off was, but you have so much to be thankful for. Which, if any of you have gone through any bout of depression, you know that is the least helpful advice that anyone could give. If you've given that advice to someone, bless your heart. I know you have good intentions and good motives, but that is not helpful. We know we have things to be thankful for. That does not change how we feel. After a couple years of it getting worse and worse, I remember sitting on my couch and my son, who was an infant at the time, was sleeping in his crib upstairs. And I was just on the couch and I was exhausted. I had been crying out to God. I had my Bible open on the table in front of me. And I was just spent. I was completely empty. And I remember praying, God, I will keep going through the motions if I'm supposed to, but I can't keep doing this. I can't keep crying out to you and feeling like it's falling on deaf ears or that you don't care. If you want to bring me out of this, you're going to have to be the one to do it because nothing that I'm doing is working and I'm just done. And I remember saying that. I remember saying that I am just done. And there wasn't a magic moment in there, so don't pause for that. I was robotic for a very long time, but eventually God did start to gradually bring me out of it. I don't even think I could tell you exactly how he did, but over time he did. The point in me telling you all of that is to let you know that I can relate and that grief can come in many forms. I've had deaths in the family, different points of suffering throughout the years for different reasons. But those years of my deepest depression is probably some of the darkest pain I've ever felt. And the key thing is that that was the point that I felt God completely abandoned me. I knew he didn't, but it just really felt like he did. What we have to remember in dissecting all of this is that pain isn't inherently good or evil. It's a result of something that touched a nerve, right? Perfect example is strength training. For my bodybuilder friends out there, Renee, I see you. When you are trying to build muscle mass, it can be painful, right? It doesn't feel good to push your body and to put it under that intense strain and pressure. But you train your body to embrace the pain by slowly tearing the fibers in the muscles in order for them to heal and rebuild stronger than before. And the pain, if you do it right, is controlled though. It's controlled, it has a specific method, a specific purpose, with a really good result. The pain itself isn't a problem. It only tells you that something is going on, something traumatic has happened, and it's a check engine light in our minds and in our bodies telling us that something traumatic has happened. And when we experience something hurtful or painful inside, it puts pressure and strain on our minds and our hearts just like bodybuilding does on our bodies. We lose someone, our kids make poor choices, whatever it is, something happens that triggers that tearing and strain on our emotions. Which brings us to our first step in this new perspective shift that we're trying to gain. We're going to look at the truth behind God's perspective on our suffering. God is fully aware of the pain that is going on in you and what's needed to get you on the other side of it. Lamentations 3 says that God doesn't take pleasure in our suffering. He does allow it though, and for very specific reasons. We may not always know why, it may not always seem fair, but that part isn't on us to know. That's God's responsibility. It's ours to choose what we do with it and whether we trust him with it or not. We know that grief wasn't in the blueprints. It wasn't God's perfect plan for humanity. Sin invited that in. And a broken world is like a permanently broken bone. It just keeps being painful. It keeps being sensitive to any kind of triggers unless it's able to fully heal and restore itself. So we know God did not originally intend for us to suffer. We know that God has intense compassion and empathy for us when we are in pain, even if we don't feel like he does or we don't feel him near. God didn't leave me in my depression. It was just that the feelings were so intense and my mind was so overwhelmed with everything else and in such a permanent fog that I couldn't feel him. And I was searching for that feeling. He was always there though. It's like gravity. Sometimes you feel it, like when you fall downstairs, you feel the gravity. Sometimes you don't, like when you're walking around every day. You don't think about it, you don't feel it, but it has a full effect on you. You still have it near you. It depends on your focus, on your feelings, and what all's going on around you, whether you're aware of it or not. And God's no different. God does care about how we feel, though. Whether he removes the cause of the pain or not, he cares deeply about our heartache. In Luke 7, Jesus actually sees a woman who, she just lost her son, so she's a widow. She lost her husband previously, I suppose, at some point. So she's just lost her last living family member, and probably her only means of survival, because that's how it kind of went in those days. If you didn't have a husband or child to take care of you, you were destitute. So she was broken, completely broken. So in Luke 7:13, this is what it says. It says, when the Lord saw her, his heart went out to her, and he said, don't cry. And I'm going to stop there because that's all we need. And I want to point something out. Yes, Jesus did end up raising her son from the dead, which healed her problem. It fixed her problem, and we don't always get that. But I want you to look at what he did first. His first priority was not ignoring the widow to fix the problem. He didn't say, go hang up your funeral clothes and return the casket, sit there and let me fix this. He told her, don't cry. Addressing her tears did absolutely nothing for the situation. It didn't stop or start anything. It only addressed her feelings. He saw the problem, and he was going to handle it. But the first thing he did was to show her that he saw her tears. He had compassion on her. It says his heart went out to her. Can you be there for just a second? Can you be in that point of your deepest pain? Just be present in it for half a second. And can you see Jesus walk up to you with tears in his eyes, having seen your heartache, having seen your struggles, having seen how much you cry or hurt even when no one's looking? And can you just hear him say, don't cry? It's not because crying is wrong. It's because he feels for us. He has compassion on us. He empathizes with us. He knows what's on the other side of the tears, though. He wants to make our tears go away. It just may not always be an immediate fix. In Isaiah 63, verse 9, it's actually a picture of the pre-incarnate Jesus, and he's talking about his people Israel. But since we've been adopted into his family, we can apply it to us as well. And all it says, well, it says a lot, but for this part, all it says is, in all their suffering, he suffered, and the angel of his presence saved them. But that first part, in all their suffering, he suffered. That means he feels every pain of his children. So even when we think he's abandoned us, he actually feels it too. And one that everybody knows, John 11:35, the shortest verse in the Bible. So context, Jesus' very close friend Lazarus had just died. He had two sisters, Mary and Martha, which you might have remembered the story. So Jesus comes, he hears that Lazarus dies, and Mary and Martha tell him where he was buried. And at that point, all it says is, Jesus wept. And that word, I am not even going to pretend to be able to pronounce it, but that word wept in the original language means he quietly shed tears. So he was just feeling it deeply. Even though he knew what was going to happen, he knew he was about to just shake everyone's world and that Lazarus would be right back in front of him again. That wasn't the point. The point was there was a loss that was suffered. His loved ones were hurting, and he felt it. The thing is that God sees the bigger picture. He feels it, but he knows the end result. Even in something as horrible as death or injustice, God knows the big picture. And there are two ways that I kind of imagine this, because I'm an image person, a picture person, just to make his perspective a little bit more understandable to me. So the first one, and I'm sure you've heard these, but I'm going to say it anyway. The first one is a keyhole. And if you've ever read or watched any of the movies of Alice in Wonderland, you can just picture a little keyhole in the side of a door. There are certain points where Alice looks through the keyhole and all she can see is what that little keyhole can capture. It looks amazing on the other side, but it's through this little bitty slit in the door. And that's our perspective compared to God's. We think we see it all, but we only experience that little tiny bit that we can see through the keyhole, while God's on the other side of the door, just in Wonderland, that's just larger and more complete than anything we could ever see through that little bitty peephole. And the other image that I like to think of as a tapestry. You know, those large woven tapestries that a weaver creates, like on a loom with a shuttle, just shuttling the thread or the yarn back and forth. Have you ever seen that done? Because it's really incredible, and the amount of skill is amazing. It's just this intricate design work that's being done when they weave this tapestry. But all we can see at any given time is either a light or dark colored strand being woven back and forth throughout the other strands. For us, we only see what's behind us and what's happening in the moment. We cannot see the big picture. We cannot see the ultimate design that's being woven. And to us, when we see those dark threads being woven, the pain, the hurt, the bad times that just don't seem to leave our mind, all we can see is that it's ugly. It's dark, it's painful, and it's ugly. But the one weaving knows the bigger picture that's being created and knows that you need the dark to contrast the light in order to make this beautiful image. And once they're done and they hold up that tapestry, you see why the dark strands were needed. In the moment, you don't want it. But afterwards, it creates a masterpiece. These aren't just cliches or pictures to make you feel better. This is the perspective shift. It's when we realize that all of our pain, the entirety of our perception, is still small and skewed, but that we can trust the one who sees how the dark is going to make the light even more beautiful. And somehow that makes the pain just a little bit easier to bear. God also knows that the pain is going to bring about spiritual growth, or it can if we let him. Pain and suffering actually causes us to be more humble, to be more dependent on him, which, trust me, is being completely dependent on God is exactly where you want to be. It's not weakness that you depend on him, it's wisdom. If we can't dictate whether or not we even take our next breath, doesn't it make sense to fully lean on the one who can? Pain also, oftentimes, equips us for ministry. 2 Corinthians 1 verse 4. I want to read to you real quick. Okay, 2 Corinthians 1 verse 4. He comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any kind of affliction through the comfort we ourselves receive from God. So essentially, the comfort that we receive from God when we're going through pain and suffering and grief, we can take that same comfort and we can turn and use it for somebody else who's now suffering or going through something, because we understand now more about it and what it feels like and how to be comforted by the most holy, perfect Father who knows best how to comfort us. And we can help and dish that out to others. So that was a long way to get to the second step. But the second step in this new perspective shift about our grief is being able to answer, where is God in all this suffering? And why does it feel like he abandons us when we're in our deepest pain? Well, we've already gotten a clearer picture of how God sees grief and suffering. We know God doesn't actually abandon us because he can't lie. And he says all throughout his word that he's not going to leave us. He's not going to forsake us. He is not going to abandon us. And there's nothing mortal or immortal that will ever be able to pull us out of his hand. So factually, we know he doesn't leave. But here are some quick truths that may point out why it feels like he does. While not all pain is a result of our own sin, sometimes it is. And if there is active sin in our life, things that we are choosing not to go to God with, not to give up because we just enjoy it too much, honestly, or we're too comfortable in it, a lot of times God will sit silent for a while and wait until we hopefully turn from that sin. So he hasn't left, but he won't listen to our prayers if we are turning our back on him to do whatever we want and choose to stay in that sin. It's not because he doesn't love us. It's because he is a perfect parent and he's not going to reward bad behavior that is to our detriment. He wants us to turn back. And if he has to stay silent for a little while to put a strain on us to make us turn back to him, then he's going to do it. A lot of times I'll say that God has a way of putting us on our back in order to make us look up. And that's not because he's cruel. It's because he knows that when we do is when we will be in the best possible position. Sometimes our pain is because we were victims of something. It could be a victim of just circumstances like a loss. It could be an injustice that happened, and we're enduring grief from that. When that happens, the event can become so big in our minds and that desire for justice so overwhelming that every other point of reasoning just goes out the window, and that becomes our sole focus. It's that microscope analogy again, that whatever you focus on consumes your entire line of sight. And in life, when that happens, we can't see or hear much else, especially a loving God whispering comfort to us. When our pain becomes the entirety of our existence, there is nothing there that can comfort us. And for most other pain, our emotions are just too overwhelming for us to process reality, and we feel like God shouldn't have allowed our pain to get that big to begin with. The grief and bitterness itself is too loud and too distracting for us to see or hear him. When this happens, we need to cater to our immediate needs and do everything we can as often as we can to quiet our minds and our hearts. And if you want to know some practical ways that you can do that, go back to the first episode in this series because we touched on several of those. The thing is, God never leaves his children. You wonder where God is? He is right where he was before the pain, right beside you. But simply being human and having our own limitations can sometimes create barriers or blinders on us that prevent us from feeling or seeing him or just knowing and being reassured that he's around. In those times, we cannot depend on our feelings. We have to hold tight to the reality, to truth, and hopefully the emotions will eventually follow suit. It just may take a while. The third step in this new perspective shift about our grief is finding the growth pattern in the pain. So that it's not just an emotion or a season that we have to go through, but we can actually start seeing it as a tool that we can use for ourselves and for other people. And listen, I get it. You may not want to look at grief through God's eyes because you feel justified in the bitterness. I've been there. You want to hold on to it. It's a known comfort because you feel wronged and you don't want to use it for any good. You're still hurting. I get it. That's a point in the healing process that hopefully you'll be able to get through with some of these tips, but definitely by surrendering to God. But here's the thing. At the end of the day, we have a chance to use our pain for growth and the good of others. And I know you've likely been through a lot of pain. I've had my share as well. We all do. I don't know about you, and maybe this is just my stubborn streak in me, but if I have to go through pain, I sure as heck don't want to waste it and for it all to be for nothing. If the enemy is going to knock me down, I will wrestle him while I'm on the ground. And, I think we have to get stubborn like that sometimes for different things in this life. I don't think that's an ungodly way of looking at it. It's a determination. We're not going to be able to avoid pain in this life. It is going to happen. But we can be determined to use it and not to have to go through it for nothing. We may not be able to understand why things happen sometimes. But we can get mad at the doubts and become determined to stand tall in what we know to be true and to move forward in that, because dang it if that doesn't make the devil mad. You want revenge on all the pain that you've had to go through from the enemy? You live your absolute best life, walking in the Spirit of God through the good and all the pain, being used by him regardless of what you go through. And you will be doing more damage to the enemy of your soul than anything else if you get stubborn against him. Listen, your feelings and your pain are valid. Don't dismiss them. Don't think you have to rush the process. We talked about that in the first episode as well. But the thing is, if we can just get our perspective in line a little bit closer with how God sees our suffering and use it as a tool, a way to get us from this point to a stronger one, a point that will reach tons of people with the Spirit of God that he comforts us with. He's willing to let us go through it because he knows what can be on the other side of it. So what is the growth pattern? Let's go back to the broken bone analogy. First is the break, the initial trauma or loss that was experienced. It's often sudden, painful, and disrupts all sense of normalcy. The second is the cast or the immobilization. This period is for the initial stages of grief. It's when you go through numbness, depression, maybe you feel more fragile than you're used to or than you realized you were, and you just need a little bit more protection and catering to than normal. Next is the swelling and the bruising. These are the intense emotions and stages of grief. It's the messy emotions like waves of anger or confusion or guilt that just hit you out of nowhere. Next is the setting and alignment. This is the period of time where you are supported and protected by the people around you who care about you, and it's essentially setting the bone correctly and allowing the time for proper healing. Next is the gradual healing. It's the long process of grief. Just like a broken bone takes a long time to heal, with good and bad days going back and forth, our grief is the same, and it is a long process. There will be good days and bad days. Hopefully, the overall trajectory, though, is one that's progressively a little less painful, with a little less frailty as it goes along. And physical therapy is next. This is the growth and strengthening of the process. Once the cast comes off, you have to work hard with proper technique to regain that strength and that full function, the flexibility that was there. It requires a lot of effort and dedication, but the strengthening is worth it, which leads to the stronger bone. There is actually a growth that happens at the point of trauma in a bone, and you medical people could be more specific with it. I'm not. But it can actually become stronger than it was before the break at that point of trauma. So when you heal properly inside, you'll discover a deeper sense of empathy, of strength, of resilience and appreciation in life. It's a strengthening that would not have occurred had the trauma not happened. And lastly is the scar. This is not a weakness, it's a reminder. Grief leaves a lasting mark. It doesn't go away, but it does not mean you're still broken. The break was part of your story, but now you have the wisdom to show off and to share with others that came from whatever God had taught you in that period of growth. Several years ago, I discovered a song by a group called I Am They, and the song is just called Scars, but it is absolutely beautiful. And I'm going to put a link down below for you to listen to it. I hope it blesses you the way it does me. And it really helped me out a lot when I was going through some other painful stuff a few years ago. So let's recap. Our perspective shift happens with three things. One, to understand God's perspective on suffering. He grieves with us, but he knows it can bring about a greater good and make us even stronger than we were before. Two is God never actually leaves us when we're grieving. It just feels like that because of how intense and big our thoughts and our feelings are, how thick the fog is around us, and sometimes the sin that we haven't let go of yet. We cling to the reality, though, that he is still there, and eventually the emotions will come around as long as we hold tight to that reality. And the third is the growth pattern that we can use in our pain, keeping that in mind. We can get stronger and we can be effective even through the brokenness. The whole process is a lot like a broken bone and its healing process. From the grief patterns and support, we can actually get stronger at the exact point of our trauma. I heard an amazing quote years ago that I'll leave you with. It says, Satan always attacks us at the point of our greatest future strength. And I don't remember who said it. If you know, leave a comment because I cannot remember who it was. But I'm going to say it again. It's Satan always attacks us at the point of our greatest future strength. That means he's not going to worry about what's going on right now necessarily. He's going to try to keep us from accomplishing and becoming everything that we're supposed to be, everything that we're supposed to do. That's where he'll attack. And we can get stubborn against that. We can be determined that even if pain comes our way, that we're going to process, to heal, and to get even stronger than we were before. Because we're going to see our pain through God's eyes, through the lens of reality, how it actually is, and we're going to refuse to waste it. Now, in the next episode, it'll be episode 3 out of 4, we're going to look at how we can actually empathize with and use our struggles and our pain to help others who may be struggling as well, even during our healing process. I know sometimes it's really hard to help others when you're healing yourself, but it is possible, and it actually helps you when you do. But until then, keep healing, keep moving forward. If I don't see you on here, I will see you in ink.